if you want to have a high click-through rate, you can't just lead with discounts, because if that is what you lead with, your customers are only going to be loyal to you because of your price offering. I'm Chris. I'm one of the co-founders of Better Nature and the head of business development. At Better Nature, we make delicious, nutritious, and all-natural plant-based protein with a mission to make protein without compromise. Plant-based protein that doesn't compromise on people, the planet, and animals.
So tell me a bit about how and why you started this business.
Yeah, so it's honestly, the start of this business was completely serendipitous. It really started when I met one of our now co-founders, Amadeus, at this random biotechnology conference when we were both still at university. This was around April 2018. And at that time, I was a transitioning vegan. I was looking for, all natural protein sources, plant-based protein sources that I could feel comfortable eating as a staple. And at that same time, Amadeus was doing his PhD on tempeh fermentation, which is this ancient fermentation process that we use to make our products. And when he introduced me to the fermentation process, to tempeh itself as a food, and the cultural significance of tempeh to Indonesian culture, I just thought it was so cool. And I honestly thought I found it incredibly surprising that I'd never come across, let alone the word tempeh before. So that was in about April 2018. And fast forward about a year, we'd built a team. We committed ourselves entirely to Better Nature to give more people access to that all natural plant-based protein that I fell in love with. through Amadeus.
Over the last, I'd say, sort of 2 to 5 years, there seems to have been an explosion in brands coming to this market where we're looking at alternative food sources, where it's the healthier version, it's the non-meat version, and so on. And I guess tempeh is the thing that makes you really stand out. So how do you get that message across efficiently in what is quite a crowded market? How do you really stand out?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you mentioned that tempeh is, one of our primary USPs. I would somewhat disagree. If we were to lead with the tempeh message, or we're tempeh this, tempeh that, the fact of the matter is that outside of London, or really just like, outside the bubble that us, I'm in, 95% of people or more have no idea what tempeh is. So, and there's no reason why they should know what tempeh is. They can't find it in their local grocery stores. They can't find it in their restaurants. It is this incredibly niche food product, which historically has sort of spent its entire life in these independent health foods, those type of stores. So instead of leading with a tempeh message, instead we lead with protein without compromise. And what we mean by that is we try to focus on USPs, or we focus our messaging entirely on USPs that we know would resonate with consumers looking for our type of product. So, our product is high in protein. It's also high in fiber. It's all natural. It's completely free from any artificial ingredients, and it tastes fantastic. So focusing on those messages and trying to make sure that those messages come across on pack as effectively as possible is how we try to stand out from the crowd. And that's really the message to the consumer. The message to the retailer is, you've got all these amazing brands that try to be these meat replicas, and no doubt they're doing, some of them are doing incredibly well. But what you've created is this vacuum in the market where there are some consumers that don't necessarily want to be eating a burger every night. They don't necessarily want to be eating a sausage every night. They're not necessarily looking for something that tastes exactly like meat. They're looking for something that's genuinely healthy, that's genuinely nutritious, that's something that they can eat every single day and not feel bad about that. And in that sort of category, all you currently have is like falafel and tofu, which, as great as they are, aren't exactly, foods that, personally speaking, I'd be happy eating every single day. I'd just get somewhat bored of it. So there needs to be more versatility, there needs to be more excitement around that part of the category. And that is, our value to the retailer.
And you seem to be doing a great job of getting this value across, not only to sort of customers and the retailers, but also your crowdfunding. To get this off the ground, you were incredibly successful at crowdfunding and did it in what I believe was one of Cedar's fastest ever crowdfunds on the platform. So what are your secrets behind that? What's your advice for anyone that's looking at doing similar?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best person to ask this question would be Ellen. And, she is our head of marketing, one of our co-founders. She ran the entire crowdfunding platform campaign. But I think one of the things we did really well is, maybe some of our listeners would know, but seeders expect at least maybe 60 to 70% of the round to have been filled prior to going on the platform. This changes depending on how much you're looking to raise, but the reason being is that they want to drive FOMO. So I think one of the things that at least I, somewhat contributed to the crowdfunding platform was securing anchor investors and institutional investors to take up what was about 70% of the round prior to going live on Seedrs. But beyond that, it's about really, crowdfunding shouldn't be the product, right? The product shouldn't be this crowdfunding campaign. Like, you look at us, invest in us, that is the product should be the brand you're offering to your customers. And in that, you should be, before you crowdfund, as a modern day business, you need to be focusing on building your community and adding value to your community and making sure that your content is engaging and that is in all of the messaging, right? Whether it's from your newsletter or your social media or your packaging, is all ties to each other really, really neatly, so that within the mind of your customer, they have a very accurate idea of what it is that you do, why it is that you do it, and how it is that you do that. So I guess one of the things that we did quite well with our crowdfunding platform was that we really engaged our community. But that's also partly because we spent a lot of time growing that community even before we went onto Seedrs. But if you look after your customers, they'll look after you. And I think for us, it sort of reflected in how quickly we were able to raise the Seedrs round. We were able to create a loyal following of customers that not only were willing to put money to buy our products, but to also put money into the business and become part of our long-term vision. So yeah, we're very, very grateful for that.
I think that community piece is so important. Obviously, we're big believers of that at the Founding Network. I think it's so important for whatever industry you're in. So tell me a bit about how you engage that community. You mentioned content, and just tell me a bit more around the strategy around that.
Yeah, again, probably a question best placed for Ellen, but around the content piece, it's really about like adding value. At the end of the day, if you want to have a high click-through rate, you can't just be going, 20% off here, 30% off here. You can't just lead with discounts, because if that is what you lead with, then at the end of the day, your customers are only going to be loyal to you because of your price offering, right? And you don't want customers like that. You want customers that are, and then also that's not sustainable, right? Depending on how competitive your space is, what your margins are, your cost structures are. Largely speaking, that's unsustainable. So instead, we try to add value in other ways. We try to, so for us, it's perhaps relatively straightforward. But again, if your brand's purpose is clear, then the way you add value is clear too. So it's really, so for us, our purpose is protein without compromise, right? And you break that down, it's, without compromise to people, the planet, and animals. To people, what does that mean? That means trying to make them as accessible and delicious and nutritious as possible. With regards to the environment, it's about trying to be as environmentally sustainable as possible. And then with our compromised animals, also about just being as ethical as possible. And obviously being vegan helps with that. So with our newsletters and our social media content, that's these are the messages that we play with. So we show, by adding value, I mean, in our newsletters, we'll say, oh, here's a really cool tip about how you can reduce your carbon footprint, or oh, did you know that blah blah blah, blah. And then so these factoids, which are interesting, right, to our consumer base, because we know our customers very well. This is stuff that resonates with them. It's interesting to our consumer base. It's what keeps them coming back. It's sort of the cherry on the cake once they've read through the messages that we want them to read through. It's like a reward at the end of the newsletter. And that's how we have really high engagement rates with our newsletter. But the same thing goes for our social media content.
And that's great that you managed to engage this community and, as you say, brought them into the crowdfund as well. That must be a similar way of engaging your team as well, I suppose. So what's it been like employing a full team, and with it being such a, I suppose, quite a niche product, do you want people that are fully bought into that product from day one, or is it more important to have the diverse thinking as part of the team? Or how did your mind work around that when building the team initially?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to think that we had a clearer strategy, or I'd like for people to think that we had a clear strategy, but really a lot of it is serendipity, and I think founders just need to appreciate that. There are many things outside of your control, and sometimes things just happen, and it's fantastic, right? So for us, really, when we found the co-founding team, again, that was all completely serendipitous. So there's now 4 co-founders, and we met each other from just random walks of life. We never came together with the idea of creating a startup together. We just knew each other as friends, and we worked together in the past, and we got along super, super well. And I guess with the rest of the team, for us, being plant forward, I'd say, is necessary. And what I mean by that is it is necessary that any of our team members understand why it is that we're trying to do what we're doing, right? So if, for someone to be pushing this plant-based agenda and then to go home and eat a massive piece of steak and to do that 5 days a week is somewhat counterintuitive, and also counter to our mission. But that said, we don't actively select for vegans and vegetarians. So for example, our head of product, right? It's important that he is also open to what consumers are looking for in their meat products, because we're a meat alternatives brand, and we need to be meeting certain sensory expectations with our products. So, but that said, like, that's maybe a once or twice a week sort of deal, and that's sort of what we look for. I think when selecting a team, there are 3 pillars, right? Or 3 big criteria that we place above everything else. And for me, as an initial screen, I will go for these. I will screen for these 3 criteria before anything else, before their technical or their educational background, whatever. Like, these 3 criteria are passion, right? So they need to have an interest in what we're doing. And I think this is relatively obvious to find. If you go into an interview and this person knows nothing about your business, then it's like, well, you obviously haven't invested the time. You obviously don't care. Second is sort of autonomy. So, as a fast-growing business, and as a business where it's usually just one person managing that entire work stream, we don't have any, or very barely any, overlap between skill sets. So what that means is that the person who joins the team needs to be able to run the agenda of that work stream entirely autonomously. So we try to select for those sort of characteristics: the ability to work independently, to have that critical thought, to also lead, right? Because ultimately, if we were to scale from a team of 10 to a team of 50, and there will come a time where there's more and more overlap, and this person will probably need to one day manage their own team. And the third thing that is just as important as anything else is mastery. So the desire to be a master in whatever craft they want to be, they want to be a master in. So they come on board as a sales executive. I want them to have the desire to be head of sales one day, or they come on board as an MD executive. I want them to come on board with the desire to be head of product. And the reason being is that, again, we're a fast growing business. And if they are the person that we think they are, then probably within 3 or 4 or 5 years time, they will be that head, right? They will be leading their own teams, leading their own division. So they'll need to grow with the role. And that comes from an innate desire to be the best. So yeah, those are the 3 pillars we select for.
Right. So the company has obviously grown at such a rapid rate over recent years. The team has built out. What has that meant for you in the day-to-day? How's your role changed as the company's developed?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, nothing has changed. But on the day-to-day, everything's changed. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, but at the end of the day, as head of BD and sales, my primary role is to sell the business, right? Whether I'm selling it to retailers or selling it to investors or selling it to the team, selling it to new recruits, like my primary role has always been in sales. And what that sort of boils down to is finding or mapping the value of the business, honing in on the value of the business, and setting the strategy of the business to make sure that that value is delivered to the investor, to the retailer, to the customer, right? So in that way, sort of in this 30,000 foot view, that is my role, and it has not changed from day one. But on a day-to-day, instead of when I first started, I was literally carrying our products from door to door of our retail partners. Obviously, this is pre-pandemic when we're still allowed to do that, but I'd have a suitcase full of product, and I'd have a list of retailers that I wanted to visit and to sell to, and I literally dragged the suitcase around London with me, and not just London. Also went to Nottingham, went to Bristol, went to other cities, and obviously that has changed. Now I don't do that anymore, but fundamentally, yeah, like I still sell, and yeah. But selling sounds like a dirty word. It really isn't. What I'm trying to do, what I do, is communicate and deliver value. That's it.
I think it's a dirty word depending on what you're trying to sell. I think if you're genuinely not a dirty word. So what's next for the business then? What are the big goals over the next year or so?
Yeah, we've got a really, really exciting range that we're launching in June that we're super, super excited about. And off the back of that, and obviously we've developed a whole new supply chain for those products. It's a fresh, I guess, strategic, or it's a fresh image for the brand as well. I think it really, these new products allow us to double down on our offering, on being that, on being that protein without compromise. The price points are far more accessible. They're very competitive in terms of price point on shelf against the likes of the mainstream meat-free brands like Corn and whoever, what have you. So with these products, it opens up a lot of opportunity, for us to explore getting into some of the largest, the UK's largest retailers. So that's certainly quite high on our agenda. But to also access just loads of different other routes to market. So whether it's convenience or food service, right? So we're looking to build out our food service offering, and that's been obviously quite quiet as of the last year, but it's starting to heat up massively, and we're well positioned to capture that sort of excitement. And I think part of it is also to start exploring. Part of it next year is also to start exploring new markets. For us being you know, as we, currently 50% of our revenues come from direct to consumer, we know how to launch online. And launching online, though in the long run may not be as sustainable as, say, traditional brick and mortar, because you're absorbing delivery costs, etc. In the short run, in terms of testing new markets, is an incredibly cheap and effective tool. So yeah, I think one of the things we're looking to do in the next year is to see where there is a latent sort of demand for our type of products for tempeh in other European markets, as well as perhaps outside of Europe, and to use that information to then influence how we then approach that market in a more concerted and a more, I guess, strategic manner.
Absolutely. It sounds like an exciting time at the business. So for those listening, where can they find out more about Better Nature?
Yeah, the best places to find out more about us is on our website. So it's www.betternaturefoods.co, betternaturefoods.co. Instagram is great as well. We're at betternature_. You can find us on LinkedIn. And yeah, if you want to reach out to me directly, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. It's Christopher Kong.